Oak Bluffs historically is where the black sailors lived. They had their own town there called Squash Meadow, going back to the 1700s. Remember, if you could get out to these islands, you'd be hired as a sailor, and you'd go to sea and you'd travel the world, and when you came back, you'd have the money to buy a house. So Squash Meadow is another one of the old black communities on the East Coast, and it still is a primarily black town. The blacks that have houses in Squash Meadow now, though, are Bill Cosby, Spike Lee, bigger houses than they had back in the 1700s. And the beach that's out in front of the houses in Squash Meadow is still called Ink Beach. But most of the blacks that lived in Squash Meadow were Methodists. And they used to have Methodist revivals where they would invite people from the mainland to come out and spend the summer in Squash Meadow at their revival camp. And these revivals were multiracial. Everybody would come. But there were a lot of Methodists from the mainland would come over to this beautiful waterfront. There was another Methodist revival place in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, just below Asbury Park. Another one near Belfast, Maine, called Bayside. They were all very similar. And what they would do is they'd have these canvas army tents they would set up for the summer, and everybody would camp in these canvas tents. They would all get together and sing in these huge choruses all summer. They had these outdoor revivals. And in the 1830s, this revival was taken over by a man named Jeremiah Pease. And what he started doing was advertising in Boston and Newport and Providence to bring hundreds of people out. He changed the name to Oak Bluffs at that point from Squash Meadow. And at that point, there were so many people out there, they had hundreds and hundreds of tents. And they built these platforms on the ground so that they didn't have to stand on the dirt. They could build the tents up on top of these wooden platforms. In the summer, they'd pack all the tents away in a barn. In the 1860s, people started to build little cottages on top of their tent platforms, so they're not living in tents anymore. And right about the time they start building these little cottages, people invent the bandsaw. The bandsaw is what makes gingerbread shapes in wood. And so there are hundreds of little cottages in Oak Bluffs that look like Hansel and Gretel's cottage, but with 8 different colors of paint on them. And these are 12 feet wide and 25 feet long, the size of the old canvas tents. They were not allowed to be any bigger than the tent platform. You could put wraparound porches around the outside of it. And you could make it a couple stories tall with dormers and little balconies sticking out, but it could only be as wide as the tent platform. So there are hundreds of these little miniature gingerbread mansions. Tiny, tiny houses lined up along the beach in Oak Bluffs. And they're all painted pink, baby blue, green, purple, brown, all different colors. Absolutely beautiful. Also in the center of the tent community, they wanted to build a cover for their choral place where they all get together and sing. They wanted it to be able to survive winter storms and be low maintenance. It's actually a cast iron tabernacle in the middle of the camp.